Hello and welcome back to another episode of Advanced RC Adventures. A2RC here. This is a channel where we investigate, explore, build and explain, upgrade and advance Nitro RCs to another level. Come start a new adventure with me. Today we have a Team Infinity, one of their high performance line engines, now long discontinued. This is the 512. Let's open up the box and dive in. Got our standard foam inside. This engine is brand new. Got some paperwork, but it has been torn down, inspected, lubricated, and cleaned. In our bubble wrap. Let's cut it open and start the adventure. Got our desiccant bag here. Came with a rear gasket, a collet, and a glow plug. And let's take a little overview here. We've got an SG shaft, Team Infinity, into the casting made in Japan. This is another Showa Toki manufactured engine. These Katana 512s are sisters of the HPI 12 RSS, the Phantom line, and many other private label engines that Showa created for a lot of different manufacturers. Black on black with some shine cuts. It's a very nice carb, and we have a special piece here that not many engines had at the time, and you do not see them today. This is a velocity stack, and we'll take a look at that here just in a second. Bump start, so we got a back plate, rear exhaust, which is definitely an upgrade from its sister, the HPI 12 RSS, which was side exhaust. This is the Katana 512. So let's start by taking off this slide carburetor. There's two ways to take this carb off. It uses small screws on top of the velocity stack, and it also has a pinch bolt down below. For today's engine overview, we're going to leave that velocity stack on there and take off the two needle carb. Yep, I said two needle carb. We've got our idle gap screw here, slide carb, high speed needle, and we have our low speed adjustment needle here on the side. Traditional butyl flat style seal, all black anodized construction. It's a nice carb, especially for its time. Let's set that down. Let's take a look at the velocity stack. If you're not aware of what a velocity stack is, or what at least the idea was, whether they actually functioned or not, you raise the carburetor up off of the block, and it allows for, after the Venturi effect at the carburetor, the air to accelerate down in towards the induction window on the crank. And the idea is to allow for a slight boost effect going into the block. I'm not 100% confident that this actually functioned, but the theory is there and it's sound. Not a lot of manufacturers used and utilized the velocity stack, but there were some, especially on this era of engine. These came out, the idea came out around the boost bottle idea. Not to say that this is at all the same kind of principle. It's definitely not. The boost bottles, in theory, worked, but in practical application, they kind of were a passing fad. The velocity stacks themselves were too, but there might have been more merit to the velocity stack. It's got a pinch bolt here on the side with an O-ring down in there. This uses a 5.5 millimeter nut. Let's go ahead and pop off the back plate and continue. So let's give these backplate bolts a little measure for folks that are always interested. This is a M2.5, and it looks like these are a 6mm long backplate bolt. The screws for the carburetor are an M2.5 as well, but they're much shorter. Looks like these are a 4mm in length, and we have seen screws hold on to the carburetors before, especially from Toki and Showa, like the 15FE and the 12FE. But these are slightly different, using an M2.5, and they come standard with a hex style head bolt, which is a nice upgrade compared to the Phillips style on the 15FE. Let's wiggle off this back plate. I personally like the whole all kind of black, makes everything kind of a ghost build with everything's black on black. I particularly like that. This is a semi-interference piston. Notice it's not been used at all. This is a brand new engine, and it uses that kind of paper style gasket for the seal on the back plate. Take a look here at the internals. You're going to see that this particular engine is definitely an upgrade from other engines. There are some Phantom engines that are similar to this, but when you look at the 12R SS, which is made by Showa for HPI, this is definitely an upgrade kind of model from that particular series engine from Showa. Showa built a lot of different engines that were similar on the same kind of platform, but depending on what the manufacturer wanted, for example, in this case Team Infinity, they wanted something definitely a little bit more special and a little bit more race oriented compared to some of the other private label engines. So let's pop off this head. So this is, like I mentioned, the 512. It had a twin sister, which was called the 512 TB. The 512 TB had a button head style, and it was turbo plug. This particular compression bowl is integrated into the head, and this uses standard style plugs. As I understand it, everything about the two engines are exactly the same, minus the color of the head. This is all black to match the block. The TB version had kind of a silver or gray anodized head, and it utilized a underhead or a head button for the turbo plugs. This head is unique in the sense that it's all CNC billet construction, and this is a multi-flow head where it can have air go through in all four directions for that much better cooling. These engines had a RPM rating of over 42,000 RPM. They were definitely screamers of their time. Let's pop out this sleeve. Now the reason why they call it a 512 is that this is a 5-port race engine. And we're going to take a look at that sleeve here in just a minute. Pop out the piston and connecting rod. Let's take a little look here. This has a single oil groove on top. This is a cut skirt style piston. This looks to be a billet machine piston, which is another upgrade on some of the other sister engines. This is a captured wrist pin. We have a clip on both sides of the wrist pin, It's not a floating style. And we have a billet connecting rod, brass bushings pressed in, oil groove here on the side, and a quite nice knife edge on the connecting rod, which is a nice big upgrade again from some of its sister engines. Let's take out this SG crank. Take a little look. This is a pretty nice crank for the club racer scene. This is kind of an engine that's in between club race and professional. Of course, it's not a fully balanced connecting rod like the professionals are, but it's definitely more than a traditional kind of club race connecting rod. We have our fang down here on the balance lobe. Let's take a little measure of the induction port. Looks like that's a 7mm bore, which is a decent size. Measure our ID on our bearings here. This is a 12mm ID bearing. It's a 7mm ID on the front and a 12mm ID bearing on the rear. It's got a nice big induction window. It's not drilled or filled, but it's got a nice big opening. It's a decent crank for this style club racing engine for sure. It uses chrome steel bearing in the rear and in the front. Rear exhaust. Pretty nice and beautiful in my opinion kind of block here. Alright, so now let's get to the meat potatoes and take a look at this sleeve. For the rear exhaust port here, it's not a typical or standard kind of exhaust window. It doesn't have extreme dog ears, but it is extended on the sides to help with that flow. A decent kind of bevel on the inside for that flow inside to out. Take a look at our transfer ports. This is where the 5-port name comes into play. We've got 2 independent transfer ports to help distribute the air and fuel mixture into the combustion chamber. And look at this boost port. This is a giant boost port for a 12 size engine. Nice big bevel or ramp on the bottom and a large opening for that boost port. Go to the other side here for the other transfer port. There's decent sized bevels on these 2 independent transfer ports on the side, and has a pretty nice pronounced lower bevel on the bottom of that sleeve to help that airflow go up and around and into those transfer ports and the boost port itself. This is ABC construction. So we have an aluminum piston, we have a brass sleeve, and chrome lining. And there's a nice bevel on the inside of the sleeve too to help with that compressed air and fuel transfer flow. This is another beautiful example of what Showa and Toki was able to create way back when these engines first came out brand new. This particular engine would be in the same kind of category as some of the other Showa private label engines from HPI, from Phantom, etc. But this just brought that series or sister style engines to another level. This is the Katana 512 from Team Infinity, built by Showa and Toki Industries in Japan. If you enjoy these types of engine overviews here at Advanced RC Adventures, then feel free to like, share, and subscribe. If you like 10 scale, nitro, and especially touring cars, then this is the place to be, and thanks for taking the adventure with me.